If you want a real case study in operating through chaos, this is it. My guest today is Kirk Keel, co-founder of Stantt, the custom menswear brand that's built its entire model around one radical idea. What if you never carried finished goods inventory? Stantt pioneered a made-to-order sizing system, eliminating traditional inventory risk in an industry that's historically drowned in it. But the last 18 months have tested even the cleanest models. Tariffs, the removal of de minimis, wholesale margin pressure, shipping cost volatility, retailers demanding protection, customers absorbing 25% price increases. In this episode, Kirk walks through how Stantt navigated a double tariff hit and preserved margins, why retail price increases had to happen and how they communicated them, the hard truth about made-to-order, customers still want it now, and why custom hasn't exploded the way many of us thought it would 10 years ago, how landing Saks in specialty stores changed their trajectory, why apparel founders should tread lightly with venture capital, the biggest pricing mistake brands make before entering wholesale, why sell-through benchmarks matter more than getting more doors, and the operational unlock that drove the biggest bottom line improvement, shipping optimization. Welcome to In the Money, an exploration of whether you can still make money in D2C and CPG. We talk to some of the most interesting $5 million to $50 million founders, operators, investors, and acquirers to ultimately answer the question, is D2C and CPG still a good business? Hope you'll enjoy the show. Kirk, as we're wrapping up Q1 26, we're still kind of in the roller coaster of tariffs from the last 4 quarters. How did you guys handle it in 25? How are you thinking about it in 26?
Yeah, the tariff situation is, I was telling you earlier, has been really all consuming. I mean, the amount of time and energy we've spent just trying to track the tariff situation from the beginning and all the changes really going back, I'd say through August or so of last year has been such a roller coaster. The number of customers that have called me over the last 6 months or so, asking questions, trying to understand what we're doing in our business has been, in some cases, a bit overwhelming. But, we take it day by day, honestly. Even more recently, there's been some changes, obviously, with the Supreme Court essentially calling all the tariffs for the last 4 or 5 months illegal. And then some of the blanket 10 or 15%, depending on who you talk to, what's happening now in the world. But at least from my standpoint and our leadership team, we're taking it day by day. We try not to, jump to too many conclusions too quickly because it is changing. And I found, with our customer base, you sort of want your decision sort of finalized and set in stone before you really start to go out and communicate that to a broader audience. In our company, we have wholesale retail customers and also a lot of customers D2C through our website. So I think a lot of it's like, develop your point of view, stick to it, and then roll it out. And in some cases, you kind of have to hope for the best, given how much this has changed.
Yeah. Did you guys roll out kind of price increases? Did you kind of try to pass some of the increased prices onto customers? Did you guys look at resourcing to different regions?
Yeah, I'd say a little bit of all of that. We did roll out a price increase. It was unfortunately a little bit more on the significant side. Our retail prices went up on average 20 to 25%. Most of that was outside of our control. And so, without getting into all maybe some of the boring details, we were double hit. We had hit by something called de minimis, which was removed and been sort of a legal loophole that companies like ours had used for years. Any company shipping out of Asia. And then we also had all the additional tariffs on top of that. So
with all of these tariff changes last year, did you look at resourcing? Did you look at increasing, kind of passing the price onto the consumer?
Yeah, we did a little bit of all that. We certainly had to take price up just given, what happened to our business. I mean, it was we were hit sort of double in that de minimis was removed, which was a legal loophole that we had used for years. And as any company, we were all using it, any company shipping out of Asia, which allowed us under certain shipments to avoid the duties. And then we had the tariffs on top of that. So yes, we were forced to take prices up. In some cases, retail prices went up 20 to 25%. And that was the most major change, I would say. We did work with our partners, our manufacturers, our the shippers that we use around the world to try to get some relief and share in some of those costs. In some cases, I'd say we were successful. In other cases, folks just couldn't budge. But ultimately, I'd say the end customer really had to to stomach some of what's happened over the last couple months.
And then I guess like after shipping and fulfillment, like how does 26 gross margin compare to 24? Like, are we talking like a kind of 5 to 10% difference, a 15 to 20% difference?
The way we thought, right or wrong in terms of the way we thought about the tariffs in terms of margin is that we did take price to a point that we were able to, in many cases, maintain our margins. We also wanted the retailer, a lot of our business, we wholesale a lot of our products through major retailers like Nordstrom and Dillard's, and it was communicated to us that it was important that they held margin as well. So again, what's unfortunate about that is, the end customer sort of had to stomach some of it. In certain cases, in certain price tiers, we took a small margin hit of up to about 5%, but the aggregate, we really tried to maintain margin as much as we could in hopes that, yes, the end price would be mostly accepted by our customer base, and hopefully in the future, some of the tariffs start to go the right direction in terms of pricing for the end customer. And at that point, we would likely reduce our prices.
Most founders treat subscriptions as a marketing tactic. The best ones treat it as a capital structure decision. Here's why that matters. Recurring revenue changes your multiple. It changes how lenders look at you and how acquirers underwrite you, and how much runway you actually have when things get tight. Predictable cash is the asset, not the size of your customer file. Recharge is the subscription platform serious e-commerce operators actually use. It gives you the visibility and control to run subscriptions like a business unit. Subscriber behavior, churn management, retention flows, built for operators who think in contribution margin, not conversion rate. Recharge runs on Shopify, and with it, you can launch and optimize subscriptions fast and convert one-time buys into recurring revenue. Brands like ButcherBox, Harry's, and Ritual are built on it. If you're building something worth acquiring or worth keeping, subscriptions aren't optional. They're your defensibility. Go to getrecharge.com. That's GETRECHARGE.com. Now, taking a step back, made to order seems like the holy grail for any inventory-based business. Stantt's a custom shirt maker. I know you do some ready-to-wear program now, but it's still mostly kind of on demand. Why hasn't made to order in broader categories kind of really taken off?
Yeah, great question. One we've certainly wrestled with here internally. My personal opinion is that, we service mostly guy customers, and guys sort of just want it when they want it, right? We've really pushed the envelope in terms of how quickly I can get you, say, a custom shirt from order actually in your hands. In many cases, we're delivering in 7 to 9 calendar days. But there's still this whole world of guys that need it now. There's obviously a mentality of guys waiting to the last minute to get something. And so even waiting 1 to 2 weeks is just not going to work. The reality is we have this massive industry in ready-to-wear that's been around for 200 years. And while we're seeing some growth on the custom side, it's not to the degree I think I'd hoped for, let's say, 10 years ago. And again, I think it gets back to that sort of that core reality that when people want their ready to, when they want it, they want it. And they sort of, the ability to wait at that point is a little bit more challenged.
Yeah, super interesting. Do you think that there are other categories outside of kind of men's tailored that this makes sense for? Like, have other brands come to you and say, hey, we want to do this in women's wear, or we want to do this in even non-apparel categories? Again, if we can reduce our inventory flow, take less long-tail inventory risk, that would be amazing.
Yes. Matter of fact, we were deep into actually launching a program in women's wear right before COVID. We were pretty far along in terms of that journey. And, we do hear it often. I'll just say the general clothing market across menswear and women's wear. The one story I can tell you that I had a company reach out that was in the rug space, home rugs, and think about the amount of inventory that's created and how products, move from countries like India and Asia to our country, and the massive warehouses needed to store sizable rugs. And why couldn't that be done more made to order on demand? And so we had some conversations with companies in that space trying to learn. I think there's applicability to a lot of industries. It does get back to, is the customer willing to wait? If so, And certainly there's pieces of the economics here that make a lot of sense for the companies in those spaces.
In the early 2010s, kind of around when Stantt was getting going, there were a number of brands in the space that were well capitalized. I guess why the explosion of kind of VC and P in the first half of the 2010s within the space?
I remember, our company now is, we had quit our jobs in 2013 and we really officially started in 2015. And so we had just celebrated a little over 10 years. And I was thinking back, I'd say initially many of us were sort of inspired by some of the darlings of the time, right? I'm thinking the Warby Parkers, I'm thinking the Harrys. I remember being inundated with Bonobos ads on Facebook. And that was really, I think, one of the first menswear brands that really leveraged, at that time, I think it was just Facebook, Instagram wasn't even a thing, but, and so there was certainly some inspiration there. Certainly VC, right, took interest and saw some potential in building brands online. We were inspired. We here at Stantt were inspired and initially thought we were going to be a DTC-only brand, and over time that changed. But there was something very attractive though when you think about just the pure economics of what we had built at the time, which was we had no finished goods inventory. Right, that was our mantra. We didn't believe in having really, warehouses filled with product with inventory risk. And I think if I'm a VC and, we have strategic investors and angel investors, and we were presenting our business plans at the time, it was like, look, there's zero inventory risk with this. Yes, we're carrying some fabrics and trims, but the core model is pretty sound when you think about how it was being operated versus the traditional ready-made brands out there at the time.
Yeah. It was interesting. I had Matt Scanlon from Nordstrom, the cashmere sweater brand, on recently, and he had a bit of a contrarian take, and maybe less contrarian today, but kind of said that it's an apparel brand really shouldn't be looking to raise equity, at least not until maybe you get to the growth stage. You should kind of let the market come to you. Again, him in a ready-to-wear business kind of leaned heavily on ABL or factoring into kind of his retail channel. But he said, it just doesn't kind of have the same dynamics of a subscription CPG business where you might have the same predictability of CAC to LTV and payback windows. Yeah, I'm curious for, if you had advice for a nascent apparel brand today, how should they think about capitalizing the business? Should they be spending a lot of energy on, trying to raise equity?
Yeah, I guess our journey was similar, different than what you just mentioned. We had many VC meetings at the time. The desire for growth was extreme. And so we had sort of strayed away from what I'll call traditional VC. We did raise money from strategic investors, two in particular, and then some angel rounds. What would I tell a brand today? If they choose to raise money, and looking back, I in hindsight maybe would have waited a little bit longer, and some would agree with that opinion you shared earlier. At some point we had to raise to really build the kind of company that we wanted to get to even some modest levels of growth that were exciting for us, and really to build what we were trying to build in that vision at the time. I would tell brands, to tread lightly. It's not the easiest environment right now to raise in for multiple reasons. Bootstrap as long as possible, and maybe that's some of the learning that we could have maybe bootstrapped for a little bit longer. Really got the core, economics in place and the fundamentals of the business in place before raising down the road. But you just got to be careful. You really got to find the right investors. We've seen the whole range of great investors and not great investors, and they can bring a lot of value beyond even the monetary side of things. But treading lightly, I think, is important, and looking for the right deal is important.
I want to take a second to tell you about what we do at Hedgehog, because if you're a founder or operator listening to this, there's a decent chance this is relevant to you or someone you know. We work with consumer brands doing $5 million to $50 million in revenue who are navigating a special situation. That might look like a lender getting aggressive, capital stack that's gotten messy, revenue-based debt or Shopify Capital, MCA stacking on top of each other. It might be a retail transition that's bleeding cash, a board that's fractured, or a founder who's just exhausted and needs a second set of eyes. We buy, advise, or restructure Sometimes that means coming in as a restructuring advisor to stabilize liquidity and run an exit process. Sometimes it means we acquire the business ourselves. We've done this 25 plus times now. Brands like Baboon to the Moon, Felix Gray, Rockets of Awesome, Nasolo, A Dozen Cousins, Koyo, Petplate, across apparel, food, CPG, footwear, accessories, personal care. If you're sitting in a situation that feels increasingly hard to manage alone, the cash is tight, the lenders are circling, and you're not sure what your options actually are, that's exactly the conversation we exist to have. Reach out directly to me at fan@thehedgehogcompany.com or find me on LinkedIn. The link is also in the show notes. You mentioned earlier that when you first started, you thought that you'd be kind of a DTC-only business, but I remember over the years we were catching up, and I think at one point you shared that you were mostly actually a retail-first business. So maybe just share your channel evolution and how you think about kind of channel mix today.
Yeah, we were definitely romanced at the time by some of the darlings I mentioned earlier in the Warbies and so forth, and thought, hey, we're going to be a DTC only brand. We can do this online. We found quickly that it was hard to do what we do online. To sell a custom shirt, custom tailor clothing isn't easy, right? And, most brands like ours, even then, we were doing some kind of online quiz, and it wasn't just very, very turnkey. It wasn't an impulse purchase that other ready-made brands would benefit from. So we had actually taken our concept, which at the time was 75 sizes, and now we have 99 sizes and even expanded to big and tall and so forth. But we took the size range and sort of the experience into various pop-ups in New York City. The first place we actually popped up was Chelsea Market. Has it's called Artists and Fleas, and it's a flea market, for lack of a better word. And within, I'd say, about a week of popping up there, we saw something very magical happen where guys love to try on the product, talk about the product and the fit, touch the fabrics, look at the buttons, and kind of build it in real time with somebody helping them. And once we saw that sort of magic happen and play out in these pop-ups, there we started to say, well, maybe there's something about this, and really trying to do this in person. And we had then started pitching specialty stores. Our first specialty store was in Hoboken, New Jersey. And then shortly after, we landed Saks Fifth Avenue. And, we were still young in the company at the time, and landing a big customer like that was a big moment for us. And we said, let's continue this journey of trying to wholesale the product. And so that took us on, I'd say, a 4 or 5 year path that, we were actively going to all the markets, talking to big bucks, all the way down to special, mom and pop specialty stores, because the experience worked so well. And we grew quickly, expanding that experience into stores around the country, in Canada, and so forth. So that's our journey. It's a little bit unique, I think, versus some of the others.
And again, for that nascent apparel brand that does want to go into retail distribution, maybe what are some of the learnings? We had an investor, Anna Whitman from Coefficient, on, and she said, even though as a VC they want growth, they really caution kind of retail distribution, kind of focus SKU, focus stores, maybe one retailer at a time, not just taking every single PO you can get, because it's really want to focus on the sell-through. And what are some kind of learnings from your journey?
Yeah, initially, because we were hopeful that we'd be the next sort of custom bonobos, right, and be that D2C play, but more on the custom side. And so we had priced our products sort of accordingly, right, taking out the middleman. And right, I mean, we all remember that story of 10 plus years ago. But when we got into wholesale and started selling the likes of Nordstrom and Dillard's and so forth, and specialty stores, it was clear that our pricing model was not correct. It was not right for that kind of business that we wanted to build, to have any level of healthy margins and allow the retailer to, retailers have very specific benchmarks in terms of the margin they expect, really, from any brand they're working with. And so we had to adjust pricing pretty quickly. Unfortunately, that did mean taking up retail pricing to a place that at the time, and I think still today, is still, I would say, a value play for custom. However, it was, significantly higher than what we would be offering if we were just a D2C play. However, that allowed for the margins for our company, allowed for the margins for the Nordstroms of the world. And so, very early on, if I'm chatting with a brand, and we do from time to time, that are thinking about getting into various spaces and adjacencies, really think about the pricing. Spend a lot of time. If you think you're going to get into retail, think about what that model looks like. Retail itself, it is a game of ups and downs and relationships. And, we could spend an hour just on and that topic and how you even enter into the retail space. But sell through is vital, right? Certainly if you're a ready made brand, you don't want to take returns. You want to put as much focus into getting the sell throughs. There's very specific benchmarks that retailers will share with you, and whatever you can do to make that happen is important. I think it is, if you get that first sort of case study, the rest flows fairly easily, right? I mean, if you have a handful of retailers and locations that have high sell through, other retailers will be interested and will listen. But I do agree, getting that sort of first benchmark and case study down with the economics right, the sell through correct, and hopefully there's some repeat, right? Retailers will ask, what kind of repeat would I expect? Is a guy going to come in and buy this product again? Is he just going to go to your website and buy again? Is a conversation that we've had 600 times, with retailers. Which one needs to navigate that conversation very carefully as well. But
is there a operational improvement that you've made in the last kind of 12 to 18 months that you've seen through the bottom line and that listeners might benefit from?
We have seen the biggest bottom line enhancements from, I'll just call it the world of shipping, right? So, we pride ourselves, we make our products. Matter of fact, if somebody orders a custom shirt, that evening, that fabric is being cut right away for that particular product, right? And we're trying to get that product in somebody's hands as fast as we can. And so the logistics side, in particular, the shipping is everything, right? So what days do we decide to ship? How do we batch orders going to one or two particular customers in cities, towns, and regions around the country? Which carriers do we work with? Which rates are we getting from those carriers? And so that became, it took a lot of sort of deep analysis to get that right and how to maximize that. And I think over the last 2 years, we've seen sort of the biggest increases there where our volumes are at a point we can negotiate better rates. We're finding the right days and moments to ship out of our factories. And how do you still give the end customer a fast experience, but, not ship in this case every single day, because that would start to sort of decrease some of the scale some of the scale benefits you get from shipping somewhere in Asia to this country. But we've seen a lot of benefit there, and a lot of hard work has gone into that and the right relationships. But a company can really drive some margin there if they do it right.
If you're serious about the economics of every order, this one's worth paying attention to. Rocked After-Sell is a leading post-purchase optimization system running from cart to thank you page. Smart checkout offers, one-click upsells, all of it connected, all of it working together. Brands like Hexclad, Jones Road, True Classic are seeing up to 30% revenue per visitor lift without touching their acquisition spend. But here's what the best growth teams are doing in 2026. They're not just squeezing more revenue per order, they're monetizing the real estate they already own. Rocked Thanks turns your confirmation page into a pure profit line with premium, non-competing offers matched by Rock's Brain AI. We're talking 30 cents to 50 cents per order straight to contribution margin. So at 50,000 orders a month, that's up to 25,000 in found profit every month from a page your customers are already landing on. Works on every platform, no contract, launch today. Go to aftersell.com/exclusive to claim your exclusive offer and start unlocking incremental revenue on every order. And maybe related, if you have a different answer, is there a single biggest win from the last kind of 12 to 18 months? New SKU or kind of product expansion, maybe new retailer, something else internal?
Yeah, I'd say, there's two areas. One is product, where we are now heavily in the tailored clothing space. So we actively sell suits, tuxedos, blazers, and that's a relatively new space for us, right? We were kind of known as the shirt brand, right? We were the custom shirt brand in every major retailer around the country, and we knew there was something about the way that the Stantt magic that could be applied to other categories, and we spent a lot of time researching and then launching a tailored clothing experience. And so that's been great for us. We just recently put that product, that line on our website. We've been doing it in our wholesalers for a period of time. But that's, huge upgrade for our business, higher dollar rings. brings more of our products into his wardrobe, which I think is important. The other side is, and this is where it's sort of our business is unique, is that we started in D2C, almost walked away from it, and we still obviously had a website and we're collecting orders, but put so much attention on our wholesale business. Over the last 18 months, we've come full circle and we are back at trying, really marketing ourselves through Meta in particular, and finally finding the success that in hindsight I wish we would have found 5 or 10 years ago. But I am over the moon excited about the upside and potential there. We are lucky we started in sort of wholesale, have the reputation and credibility of these best all these great retailers around the country, and then now leveraging that and that confidence in our product and that credibility into an online audience has worked really well for us. And so, we're ecstatic about those results recently.
And why has that worked? I'm curious. I know that when we chatted a couple weeks ago, that custom online, it's a hard nut to crack because there's so much work from the user, which just very, is inversely correlated to the conversion rate. And yeah, is it kind of website design? Is it meta creative? Like, what's kind of now made online start to work for you guys?
Meta, certainly, the world, even a few years ago, and you're aware of this, I'm sure a lot of the listeners, where the amount of AI now in building, launching, managing meta campaigns is so much more straightforward, frankly, so much easier, in our opinion. And less time consuming, I'd say more efficient if you're doing it right. So, leaps and bounds differences. And I think that's, I'd say that's the first point that at least from our standpoint, how we've looked at the online space and why we found success recently. A lot of the AI been driven through Meta is just extraordinary. We spent a lot of time on page optimization, particularly our PDPs. How do you give them confidence to take a few extra minutes to go through that process? Things that are probably somewhat obvious around reviews and credibility and quotes and so forth. A lot of time spent there. The last is really upgrading. We admittedly had not spent a lot of time, energy, money on making our products look beautiful on the website. We were just so wholesale driven and focused for such a long period of time. We have changed our opinion on that over the last 18 months and really started to step up the visual representation of who we are, the brand, the product. That has absolutely made a difference. It's given him more confidence, again, to take a few more minutes to fill out the online fit quiz. We do something called a home try-on fit kit experience that he's more comfortable doing, knowing that there's a lot behind it now, and the imagery makes him feel, I think, more inspired to do it.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Kirk, is there something that you're particularly excited about in 26? You've got kind of retail working, you've got product expansion happening. Yeah, is there a, fun or novel 26 objective or goal that, you guys are circling around internally?
There's some new retailers on the horizon that, we'll be chatting about soon over the next couple of weeks. We've done some tests with a handful of retailers, not only in the US, but also internationally, that we see a lot of upside, a lot of potential, and a really good partnership with some other retailers. The other thing, and I think we might have talked briefly, but our ready-to-wear business, again, it's weird how we've sort of changed and evolved as a company, but we're accepting that ready-to-wear it's been here, it's here to stay. There's a customer that loves the immediacy of it. And so 2 years ago, maybe a little less, we launched our first dress shirt program, and acting like other dress shirt makers out there, stocking some products, particularly the high-selling products. The top 10 shirts are generally white and blues, right? No surprise, but we have, big plans to keep expanding that program. It's already in about 100 retailers today. It's being sold on our website. And I think there's so much upside for us there. So excited about that, excited about the Meta results, certainly excited to keep continuing the tailored clothing growth here in the company.
Yeah, amazing. Kirk, as we wrap up, is there anything that you're looking for from listeners? Obviously, they should go and check out Stantt. Are you looking for channel partners, collaborators, investors to accelerate Stantt's next phase of growth?
any retailers are listening, absolutely, feel free to reach out. We're we always love having those conversations. I'd say just outside of that, always happy to help, other brands that are trying to enter the space or adjacent spaces. If we can be helpful, please reach out to us. Happy to chat.
Amazing. Kirk, thanks so much for coming on and look forward to next time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's been fun.